What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here in our podcast. What's going on in pop culture right now? We got a big one this week. A ton of stuff to get to. On the news front, Amazon now has creative control of James Bond. A lot to get into with that. Of course, I had to do my 2025 Oscar predictions. We're finally at that time. Catching up on Paddington in Peru, which I had missed. And then a ton of music. On the K-pop side, we have Zero Base One, G-Dragon's first album in 7 years, and also the highly anticipated third album from rising pop star Tate McRae. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod, see the links below. Got the best of 2025 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good. Let's get into it. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here to react to, discuss, explain Amazon and MGM's final acquisition of the James Bond franchise. Amazon now has full creative control, creative freedom to use and exploit the James Bond 007 IP as they wish. Barbara Broccoli and her family sold for over $1 billion to Amazon these rights. Now, of course, this all dates back to 2021 when Amazon bought MGM for a price several billion more than the original evaluation. And a large part of that was because MGM had the film rights to the James Bond franchise, of course. And they've, James Bond been a long established pillar at MGM, of course. Despite that sale, though, the Broccoli family still maintained creative control over the James Bond franchise and thus controlled the output. Of course, that, goes back to Albert Broccoli, a longtime film producer of many James Bond films, and then, of course, his children. Barbara Broccoli had been the new figurehead, and from everything we know, the Broccoli family had been really protective and careful stewards of James Bond storytelling, right? There was a clear reason why we never got a James Bond TV show. We never had James Bond spin-offs, right? The extent of that would be like video games, It was really a big screen property. And seemingly, now it's coming out a bit more, is that the lack of movement for a new iteration of James Bond following Daniel Craig's final go-around in No Time to Die in 2021, the reason there hasn't been any headway there is because the Broccoli family and Amazon have been kind of butting heads over the direction. And now that's all gone, From what we're understanding, Barbara Broccoli's partner in all this, Michael Wilson, had wanted to retire, and it seems like Barbara just kind of like gave up fighting the good fight, so to speak, and cashed out as a result. And, unfortunately, I find this pretty concerning because, having someone who wants to be a clear steward of an IP is rare these days, right? Usually it's just people who want to exploit it financially, right? We see that across entertainment companies, no matter who's involved. And now, are we going to get a James Bond TV show on Amazon? And how is that going to go? There's a quote going around about it being no different than a Jack Reacher show soon enough. That's concerning, I like Amazon's Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Polarizing show, James Bond, I would love it to get going on the big screen. I do think there's some ways to kind of modernize that storytelling approach. Namely, next James Bond film series should be more serialized. The Craig Bonds were not consistently serialized. I think you need that with your franchise storytelling now. That's kind of a no-brainer. But, if we get lots of James Bond spin-offs and 007 stuff, I don't know. It could quickly get diminishing returns. It could quickly sully the brand. And that's the one thing that's been consistent with James Bond brand is that, is it the biggest film franchise in the world? No. But it's always been successful. And it's always been intelligent. It's always been for adults. And it's always maintained a core audience across generations at this point because of that. Despite the fact that, the James Bond films, they're up and down across the history, the 25 or whatever that we've gotten. And I'm just a bit worried now that I don't trust Amazon with that, right? MGM under Amazon hasn't exactly proven much either, right, in terms of continuing things on the big screen. So just a lot of unknown here. Of course, the next question would be, who is going to be the next James Bond? This is something we talked about after No Time to Die, released, because it's the obvious question, the obvious talking point, and then really nothing's changed in the 3+ years since that movie came out. A movie I liked quite a bit. Who's up for grabs? Who's new in the mix? I think someone talked about that time that still makes a lot of sense would be Josh O'Connor. Showing a debonair side on the Netflix's The Crown, also showing a lot of physicality and uniqueness in Challengers last year. I would love to see that. Regé-Jean Page from Bridgerton, early Bridgerton, he, fits the bill in many, many respects. Hasn't been quite as hot as he was a few years ago, but a name in the mix. I think the question, too, they always have to think about with this is whoever they're going to cast needs to play James Bond for a long time, think like 10+ years, right? So a lot of the famous names that have been talked about a lot over the years don't make a lick of sense in this role. Tom Hardy, Henry Cavill, Idris Elba, they're all too old. Like, this doesn't make any sense to pick those guys. Also, I think there is something to be said about picking someone who's not incredibly famous, who has a bit of an unknown quality to them, or at least is a bit not fully established, the mainstream level. That was certainly the case with casting Daniel Craig. I think of guys like Jack Lowden or Jack O'Connell. I think they kind of fit the bill, kind of obvious. The thing is, like, none of these people are really jumping out per se as like the clear pick. For a while there was a lot of like heavy rumors that Aaron Taylor Johnson was actually the favorite of the Broccoli family. And I'd have to imagine that has lost steam since Kraven the Hunter performed so poorly. On the other hand, I thought he looked pretty good in the suit in Bullet Train. I believe in it. I would buy into Aaron Taylor Johnson, but he might be a bit too famous. I'm not sure. Honestly, I think my favorite pick, something I've been on for a while now, would be Harry Lawdy, who of course broke out on HBO's Industry. And it was just announced the same day this Bond news dropped that Harry Lawdy will not be returning to Industry for season 4 due to scheduling conflicts. Those scheduling conflicts are obviously not James Bond, but maybe they could be. I would root for it. I think he's someone who's young enough, looks the part, British, also not super famous. He's not a complete unknown. We know he's good, and he's getting in a lot more stuff quite quickly. He was just in Joker 2, but he's not mainstream. And I think he could really slip right in. Yeah, you have to bulk up a little bit. He can handle that. I don't know. I think Josh O'Connor or Harry Lawdy are my picks. I have really no inclination on like when we would have any realistic idea of like when this would happen, when we get an announcement. Like, would they really spin this up and running by the end of the year? I mean, it depends how quickly that deal officially closes. It's not closed yet, but I don't know, man. We'll probably get news about some kind of development, right? Maybe even if it's just script writers or showrunner or director, it's detached, whoever it is, this year for sure once it's closed. But I don't know if we'll get the casting for quite some time. This also brings back into fold the notion of certain auteur directors have wanted to come to the property, like Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan over the years, but of course they wanted full creative control, as they should, as they have that right as creators. The Broccoli family would never acquiesce to something like that. Maybe something like that is now on the table. We'll see. Denis Villeneuve, be interesting. You need someone who's available, though, right? If they want to shoot this thing next year, we'll say. Hard to say. Let me know, though, how you feeling about Amazon becoming the new stewards of James Bond? Are you worried? Are you excited? Who do you want to be the next James Bond? The eternal question we've been asking for years. Let me know. And for more James Bond talk as the opportunities arise, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Paddington in Peru, the latest animated adventure comedy film, the third in the Paddington series, which of course is a Hallmark, landmark, children's film series from Britain, of course adapting the famous Paddington Bear Michael Bond books from the 20th century. The first two Paddington movies were directed by Paul King. Paddington Peru was not. Dougal Wilson takes over. Paul King instead went on to make Wonka with Timothée Chalamet last year. That being said, this is the first Paddington movie since Paddington 2, released in 2017, and of course Paddington 2 is one of the biggest instant classics of the 21st century. That film dethroned Citizen Kane as the highest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes. Only after the fact did it even get its first negative review for all what that means, of course. But Paddington and Paddington 2 especially really grabbed people as a really effective and charming, kids film series. So it was only a matter of time before another Paddington movie would come out, and of course they were actually quite successful, particularly overseas. But overall, they're strongly performing movies, so it made sense we would get something else again. Paddington Peru definitely continues the great vibes that you get from the Paddington film series. The ensemble cast, Ben Wishaw's excellent voice performance, fun bits of physical comedy, a general charming and nice nature to the storytelling, all that's still here. I do think Paddington Peru is lacking compared to the high marks set from the first two movies, because taking us out of London and going to Paddington's native Peru instead changes what kind of movie this is. We obviously don't have a lot of the same charms and quirks that we got with Paddington being in London, being in England. And this is more of a straightforward form of storytelling compared to the first two Paddington movies. It's still good. It's still a great time. It's still funny. It's still really nice. It's just not quite as excellent as the first two movies. Another notable aspect to Paddington Peru is that Sally Hawkins' Mrs. Brown character was recast. Mary Brown is now played by Emily Mortimer. And that was something that, at least publicly, officially, Sally Hawkins apparently just didn't want to return. She had a statement put out publicly when they announced the recast. So honestly, Emily Mortimer though fits in just fine. Fits like a glove. I thought she was great. Of course, Hugh Bonneville also incredibly charming as Mr. Brown in the film. I did find it a bit interesting that Antonio Banderas is effectively playing a very similar character compared to what he did in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny in terms of a guy on a boat, a supporting character on a boat. I think he has one of the main antagonists in the movie, the main antagonist, I guess you could say. His whole familial curse, familial baggage, where he's seeing different versions of his ancestors, also all played by Banderas. It's like, I don't know if that stuff totally landed. Again, we're comparing the villain in this movie to the excellent work from Hugh Grant in Paddington 2. It just doesn't really compare. But I thought Banderas was okay. I liked Olivia Colman's role as the Reverend Mother a lot more, just because they tease you and they lead you into thinking things about her character, then they fake you out with it, and then they actually have a late-breaking reveal once again with her. Partially telegraphed to any adult viewer in the sense that it's Olivia Colman. She's not going to have a really small, nothing part, so you have to assume something's going to happen with her character. But I still like the way they handled it, and she was a fun presence and really grabbed the energy and the charms and the whimsy of the Paddington storytelling again. I do think the very end of the film also is quite heartwarming as well. It's just a really satisfying form of storytelling, even if I think some of the set pieces probably are less good than others. I think the stuff on the boat, I like all the stuff on the boat early on. I love the stuff with the rolling boulder. The stuff in the middle of the jungle is fine. But yeah, overall, it's a solid Paddington film. It's just not really a transcendent one. Maybe we'll attribute some of that to Paul King not being the director this time around, only having a story by credit for what that's worth. If we ever had an Oscar category for mocap and voice work, though, Ben Whishaw would certainly be up for it, because his performance as Paddington is so great. And the Paddington character is just so fun, and despite his ups and downs, his trials and tribulations, just fun to be. And yeah, shout out Paddington. I mean, even a lesser Paddington film is still better than most children's entertainment that comes out. So we have to remember that. Let me know, though, what'd you think of Paddington Peru? What'd you like most about it? How would you compare it to the previous films? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Zero Base One's 5th EP, Blue Paradise. Zero Base One back after 2 EP drops last year. They've really kind of fallen into their own, found their lane of, small but significant success as far as new 5th gen K-pop male groups go. Just we haven't really had a whole lot of those finding big success lately, definitely in a time dominated by new girl groups. That being said, there is a lot of momentum for Zero Base One. Apparently, their label, Wake One, is looking into renewing their contract, which interestingly enough was of the smaller term, only 2.5 years reportedly. Of course, they're a group that was founded, out of a reality series, like many groups are, but perhaps that was like a hedging of risk on the part of Wake One, which is a smaller label. Nonetheless, it appears they are looking into extending the group, which I think would make some sense because they've been able to find, growing momentum as a group. That's certainly, a peg below the blockbuster groups of their peers. I have to apologize to Zero Base One. I was not familiar with their game. Zero Base One's 5th EP, Blue Paradise, is excellent. This is easily the best thing I've ever heard from them. I liked every song on this. This EP is so energetic, so rhythmic, interesting beats. I love the energy from all the groups. Vocally, the group fits right in on all of these beats, and the hooks, the choruses are universally great on this. Really grabs you, really well done, nothing super repetitive. I was really impressed with this. I think the lead single, Blue, is excellent, very melodic, great hook. Kind of love the chant, but like ultimately has like these really fun synths. I think it's one of their best songs of the young year thus far in K-pop. However, my favorite song on this release has to be track 2, Devil's Game. I love that funky bass line. The high register harmonizing sounds great, leading into more of a vocal breakdown. Great track. There's like a brief dance break at the end, leading into an outro. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I enjoy that one a lot. One of the singles, Doctor Doctor, track 3. This one's kind of an interesting mismatch. It's kind of like all over the place genre-wise. At time, the back half of the song and has like a OG hip hop flow, I guess you could say. Zero Base One, not really rappers with any consistency, so I was kind of surprised to hear that. Interesting song. I think if there's a song I like the least on this project, it's probably that song, although I do give a lot of credit for kind of being like a lot of things at once. Out of Love is interesting because you get this up-tempo guitar for the first time, kind of like a pop punk energy, pop punk by way of K-pop, pretty cool. Chorus, very poppy. I love the vocal performance, almost like a shortness of breath type vibe. Song definitely works. I love the energy. Step Back has really catchy strings, like the strumming just kind of under the surface. And again, another good chorus. Then you have some horns kind of come out of nowhere in the background. Sounds great. And then the last track, is this a slow ballad outro like many a K-pop EP? No. Cruel, very bouncy, and a super smooth chorus. These fun chords. This was a great listen. I think this is, a great example of a K-pop EP working well. A lot of times I'm always like, I wish this was a full-length album. Wish there was more time. An EP can be derailed quite quickly if there's a dud or two on it because the track list, the runtime is so short. In this case, Zero Base One with Blue Paradise, I think they really nailed it. And even the song I like the least, Doctor Doctor, is still quite interesting, still quite unique for what it is. So this is a total success. Glad to hear that they are renewing. It sounds like this is a group that's continuing to find new heights. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of G-Dragon's third album, Ubermensch. This is G-Dragon's first solo album since 2017. The king of K-pop, frontman of Big Bang, is back after a long layoff, and I think a lot of anticipation, given his status, his legacy to this point in K-pop. I mean, at this point, we're in probably G-Dragon's like third act of his career at this point. And this comeback, this new life for Big Bang in general has kind of been brewing the last few years. There was that comeback Big Bang single Still Life in 2022. Band member Taeyang had his solo album in 2023. Top was on Squid Game Season 2 very recently. It's been quiet for Daesung, but overall, the group has been kind of around, at least during solo activities. They've all left YG Entertainment after, 20 years or so on the label, and now G-Dragon is signed with Galaxy Corporation and also Empire Records for distribution here in the US. And yeah, I think no matter your thoughts on Big Bang or G-Dragon, I mean, a figure this significant in the history of K-pop releasing a album with like this much of a promotion and several music videos. It's pretty significant. The heyday of Big Bang is largely before my time as a K-pop listener, but I will say that Haru Haru is one of, if not my favorite K-pop songs. Absolutely incredible stuff. And yeah, I just was curious about like what would this album sound like. G Dragon's third album, Ubermensch, is very much what you expect from G Dragon, for good and bad. Very singular, idiosyncratic, unique, different. And that's the best thing I can say about G Dragon is that no one else is really like him in K-pop, and we find a lot of trend chasing in K-pop these days in terms of sound, in terms of concept, but you're not getting that from G Dragon on Ubermensch, and that's what makes this so cool. Does everything work on this? No, I think the single Power has a terrible hook. That repetitiveness is incredibly grating. But other moments on this album are really cool, such as Too Bad, his collaboration with Anderson .Paak. More than anything, I just appreciate the desire to march to the beat of your own drum and make the art you want to make. One of the singles, Home Sweet Home, features Taeyang and Daesung. They performed that at one of the year-end awards shows. The song has definitely become a big hit for K-pop, over 50 million streams on Spotify. It's largely still a G-Dragon song. You couldn't call it a Big Bang song because Taeyang and Daesung are small parts of the music, but I like the vocal inflections, the accents of G-Dragon, his ability to change and modulate his voice and kind of come across as, you know, very cherubic and childlike at times. The way he performs, you get that like firsthand on that song. EDM drop chorus, you know, it's kind of slight to me. I wish there was kind of more lyrics to it, to be honest. The song is pretty solid. I mentioned Power, which, you know, big music video aside, just I think the hook is really bad. And I actually don't mind the verses. I enjoy his hip hop and his, you know, kind of throwback old school rap flow. I enjoy that at times, and I think it's good on those verses. You know, I think the bridge part where he says, you know, I don't give a shit. Like, I love the singing on that. I think it sounds good. And then this song is just completely derailed by its hook. It's a bit of a shame. Too Bad with Anderson. I think the percussion is really fun on this. You know, percussion, we often associate that with Anderson. I'm curious if he played it himself. I don't think he did. The song, you know, perhaps you could say it's a bit sanitized. It's a bit commercial, a bit more mainstream leaning per the G Dragon standard. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I think the song just really works. Drama is one of the slower songs, very, you know, much just piano ballad stuff here. Heavy autotune from GD, even going like Daft Punk performance style at the end. I think the song's alright, but, you know, it's noticeably slower, and I think the weird quirks and the unexpectedness of the rest of his music is necessarily what I would look to, not necessarily a song like this. I Belong to You, though, wakes us right back up, very up tempo. I love the drum line. The next song, Take Me, up tempo again. I think that's the best chorus on the whole album. Bona Mana has a nice, like, you know, guitar strumming and GD doing like a deeper voice, which I thought was pretty noticeable. Then you have the last song, Gyro Drop, which is pretty solid as well. I'll be curious how this album is received because, again, it's just so different. It's so unlike, you know, most new K-pop you get these days, right? I mean, you compare this to anything you get from the new generation or even like the fourth generation, like the third generation for that matter. You just don't really get anything this idiosyncratic, this kind of off the wall. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean the quality is flawless. It certainly doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that it stands alone and comes across as more singular and I think say more creative, more artistic for sure. And I will always appreciate that, even if, you know, choice to choice, it's not always my favorite thing. But yeah, let me know. What'd you think of G Dragon's long-awaited comeback with Ubermensch? What'd you like most about it? Let me know. And for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Tate McRae's third album, So Close to What? Little over a year and change since her last record, which saw Tate find massive success with the song Greedy, top 3 on the Billboard chart, now over 1.6 billion streams on Spotify. Tate McRae has become a significant artist after, you know, being a talent show winner, signed to RCA at a young age, and taking a long time to actually debut with that first album. And now I think we're to the point where Is Tate McRae going to ascend into that upper tier of pop stars, or is she still a peg or two down? Clearly, the star is on the rise. She's on her biggest tour yet, doing arenas for the first time in a high profile relationship with the kid Leroy. And she's also clearly getting a pretty big push from the industry, working with a lot of really talented A-list songwriters on this album, like Ryan Tedder, Amy Allen, Julia Michaels. Coming into this album, I can't say I was super excited about it because I have found Tate McRae a bit lacking to this point. Yes, she has some catchy songs, but ultimately, I've never found her music that interesting. She made a pretty stark transition between album 1 and 2, going from the more bedroom pop stuff to the bigger dance pop more angle with album 2, and that continues with this third album. I think it makes sense. She does have a really strong dance breakdown. That's probably the best aspect of her artistry, so I think it makes sense to kind of lean into that genre a bit more. But for me, Tate's often the least interesting part of her own music. The vocals are just pretty unimpressive to this point, and she's just not distinct. She's not unique. Tate McRae takes a step in the right direction with her third album, So Close to What, but I still find her vocals often lacking. The beats are often so overproduced to the point of masking her vocals, and as a result, Tate often fades into the background on her own music. That said, I do think there's some good moments on this album, but I just don't think this is the album that's going to take Tate McRae to the next level, because I don't think there's just enough here with the artistry still. However, you listen to lead single Sports Car, which has become a hit to this point. That's a song that's both a great beat and a great hook, and a good example of Tate's more understated vocals actually working really well on the song. When she's in more of that mold, I think she's pretty successful for what she's doing. However, there are just other songs where the beat is so clearly hiding her singing. Do you have to be the best singer in the world to be a top tier pop star? No, you do not, but you do have to make more interesting music than we're largely getting right now. Track 1, Miss Possessive. I think the beat actually has a pretty nice groove. I like the kick drums on it. Tate going into like a higher register chorus as a way to like not really belt out too much, I guess. Has the dance break at the end. Solid song. Track 2, Two Hands. This is an interesting one because like the beat gets bigger and more layered and starts to really hide the vocals again. Like this is just what I keep sticking to when I listen to her music, is the fact that it's like the production is clearly so layered and so involved to the point of not really letting her vocals sing. Revolving Door. I like Tate's performance on the verses. I think they're very energetic, but the song just has like no hook at all. Like intentionally doesn't have a hook. Kind of weird. Blood on My Hands. I like this one, kind of like a garage beat, very up tempo, fun collab with Flo Milli here, who fits the song well. Dear God, this is my favorite song on the album. I think it's the catchiest song here. I love these up tempo drums. The delivery switch ups that Tate does in terms of her inflection sound great. Excellent mixing overall. The beat doesn't drown her out. I like this song a lot. Then that leads into Purple Lace Bra, which I also think is pretty good. Probably the best lyrical examination she does on the album. Then you get the lead single Sports Car, which I mentioned. Talk about a strong run. That's definitely the best 3 songs on the album. I Know Love featuring the kid Leroy, her boyfriend. Always fun when you get something like that. They've talked about wanting to collaborate for some time. They've been dating for some time at this point. So kind of a bit overdue, I guess. And honestly, they're a great match because they're similar types of singers. You know, Kid Leroy, he definitely gets a bit more impassioned and, angsty than Tate does, but they're similar types of singers. I actually think they fit together well on the song. And the chorus is okay, but the refrain really works on that one. I also want to shout out No, I'm Not in Love. I thought that song was just super bouncy. But yeah, Tate McRae, like, I think this is confirmation, I guess, that like this is clearly her lane. The sound of these last 2 albums, not really the sound of her breakout hit. You Broke Me First. She's not really doing that kind of music anymore, which is cool. I mean, she made that song when she was a teenager, so it makes sense that she would change. And she's still quite young. There's still room for improvement. I would expect better music in the future. I do think it's cool that she seems to be kind of leaning into more of the performance angle of her music because she has such a strong dance breakdown. I think that's a great choice, you know. And you think about I think about other artists, right, that are like not necessarily the best vocalists in the world. You think of someone like Charlie, right, whose stellar songwriting and inventiveness is what propels her. She's someone who openly talks about the fact that she uses lots of autotune. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with not being the best vocalist, but I think hiding your vocals with the beats doesn't really do you any favors because it just highlights how uninteresting what's going on at the moment actually is. And maybe she'll get past that. We'll see. For now, though, she's clearly an artist to me that's a peg or two down. And frankly, you think about her peers, so to speak. I think songwriting wise, someone like Gracie Abrams is certainly grabbing people a lot more than Tate is. But maybe Tate's kind of lean to the radio angle, right? Like she's just going to have a few catchy bangers that really take off. Clearly, playlist core fits her well. Maybe so. But clearly I'm pretty negative overall. I'd love to hear what other people think. People that are fans of hers, let me know. And for more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Welcome Back Nostalgia? Dave here with my 2025 Oscar predictions. I'm going to go through every major category. I'm just skipping the shorts. I'll go through every other category, predict who will win, who I would like to win, and talk about my reasons why. We're going to analyze the precursors, the race to this point. The voting is over. All the precursor ceremonies have happened. It's time to decide who will win. And this is, I think, the most interesting Oscar race in several years because so much is undecided. Yes, there's some locked up bigger races in the supporting categories like there often always is. But thankfully, a lot of the other stuff has not completely crystallized, at least not to the degree that we're used to. I think that just really makes it fun. This is an award season that, if you've been paying attention to it, has had a lot of ebbs and flows and a lot of changing of the guard in terms of who is the presumed frontrunner for Best Picture. And I think that's what we want, right? That's what makes it fun. It's partially a product of this probably being a not as strong movie year depth-wise, even if I think at the top it's as good as it always is. But yeah, let's just kind of jump right into it. There's a lot of categories to get to. We'll work our way up to Best Picture, but let's kind of start towards the bottom here. Best Animated Feature. This is a category that, of course, gets a lot of attention because it's often littered with movies that are pretty widely seen. In this case, the nominees are The Wild Robot, Flow, Inside Out 2, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, and Memoir of a Snail. The overwhelming favorite is The Wild Robot, which has won most, but not all, of the precursor categories. Wallace and Gromit recently picking up a dub, kind of surprisingly, at BAFTA. The main spoiler for The Wild Robot, which is an excellent movie, I had it in my top 10 this year. That would be my pick. The spoiler would be Flow, which is also nominated for Best International Feature Film, of course, an animated movie from Latvia. Flow, I appreciate but didn't love to the degree a lot of other people did. It hasn't won enough awards. It hasn't had any kind of sustained counter momentum to be, I think, a movie you could confidently pick. It's going to be Wild Robot. I think that is the correct choice. I think this is pretty, nailed and shut at this point. For Best Documentary Feature, the nominees are Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, Black Box Diary, Sugarcane, Porcelain War, and No Other Land. This seems to be quite easily going to No Other Land, which is a movie about recent events in Palestine and Israel, although it's a movie that everyone says is not really a political, geopolitical bent to it. It's more about humanity, and that's why I think it's actually a lot more of a populist type modern times doc. Jumping into the craft categories, you have a lot of familiar names throughout all of these. Best visual effects we'll start with. Nominees are Dune Part 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Wicked, Better Man, and Alien Romulus. This is pretty easily going to go to Dune Part 2. Dune has a lot of nominations in the craft categories. Dune is nominated for Best Picture. Usually this is how it goes. The first Dune, of course, very similarly performed very well in these categories. See no reason to expect Dune Part 2 not to do well as well, despite the fact that Dune Part 2 has basically no chance to win Best Picture. And I think it's the right choice. Although, in general, I actually like the category quite a bit. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and Better Man, both monkey movies, look amazing, great mocap. Alien Romulus, happy it's there. Wicked, probably my least favorite of these picks here, and I guess if there was a true spoiler in the craft categories, it's probably Wicked, which did really well in terms of total nominations, but I'll go with Dune Part 2. Best Sound, the nominees are Wicked, Dune Part 2, A Complete Unknown, Emilia Perez, and The Wild Robot. Complete Unknown and Emilia Perez, both Best Picture nominees that have music, musical movies in them. Wicked, though, is the most musical of all of those three, and it's pretty easily the favorite, I think. Although Dune Part 2 is here again, will be an awesome pick for Best Sound. But I think that musical is going to win more often than not when it's in this category and has a lot of broad support like a movie like Wicked does. So I think that's the pick. But would not be shocked if Dune wins. Best Song, I believe they changed the name. It used to be Best Original Song, now it's just Best Song. Emilia Perez is in here twice with El Mal and Mi Camino. Sing Sing, Like a Bird. Elton John, Never Too Late. And then The Journey, that's the Diane Warren song from Netflix's The 688. Pretty dreadful category, like most of the time is. Of course, Wicked not eligible for this because of not original songs. El Mal seems to have been the favorite the entire time. I see the only thing that make me, not pick it is given all the controversy, all the backlash to Emilia Perez's award chances because of star Carlos Sofia Gascon's old tweets and subsequently really fumbled apologies and backtracking and all of that. That kind of negativity could affect other parts of the movie. It's possible. I don't think it's going to happen like with stuff below the line necessarily, but you can't rule it out. But I guess like who would you pick instead? I mean, it is a memorable moment of the movie as sung by Zoe Saldana. So like just because the rest of the category is so uninspiring, I just don't see a reason for it not to still win. But I wouldn't be shocked if Diane Warren finally gets her win after a million nominations. Best Score, the nominees are Wicked, Emilia Perez, The Wild Robot, Conclave, and The Brutalist. The best score here is The Brutalist. Absolutely epic score, one of the best scores of the 2020s. That should win, and I think it will win, although part of me wants to note Conclave as a spoiler in this category if Conclave just has an amazing night and gets a ton of wins after a healthy nomination total. Possible. Emilia Perez, Wicked, I think are quite unlikely unless they're gonna run the table. Wild Robot also I don't think has much of a chance, just like in Song. So yeah, I think it's The Brutalist, but look out for Conclave. Best Production Design, the nominees are Dune Part 2, Conclave, Nosferatu, The Brutalist, and Wicked. This is a tough one because I feel like you can make the case for 4 of these wins. I don't see a path for Nosferatu to win, although it's a very just and awesome nomination. Wicked has been tabbed in this category for a while now since the nominations. Again, Wicked did quite well below the line. I mean, it's not the most interesting production design to me. I think The Brutalist gets so much out of its production design, given that movie's budget. That would probably be my pick. Dune Part 2 also very worthy. And again, look out for Conclave, which also is a beautifully, looking movie. Although I think the production design is probably less spectacular than, say, that movie's, cinematography, for example. But, Dune, Brutalist, I mean, those are both awesome, worthy winners. I don't know. If I had more confidence in The Brutalist overall, like top down, I would go there. But because I don't necessarily have that, and we'll get to that, it's probably going to be Wicked. But I think this is one where, surprise, so to speak, could happen. Best Makeup and Hairstyle, and this is actually a oddly competitive one, relatively speaking. Usually there's a movie that kind of easily rises up, or even a smaller movie that ends up winning it. But there's not a lot of intrigue in this category usually. The nominees this time are Emilia Perez, Nosferatu, A Different Man, Wicked, and The Substance. I think all 5 of those super well-earned nominations. Wicked has a obviousness to this category. Obviously, Cynthia Erivo is green the entire movie, right? And and Wicked has more fantastical costumes, literally. But The Substance, specifically, its last 30 minutes, but even the whole ethos, the subject of what that movie is about, makes perfect sense in this category. And that's why The Substance is going to win this. And normally you would think the Wicked would clean up with this, given the depth of nominations it has, right? Being a Best Picture nominee. But it's going up against another Best Picture nominee in The Substance that its whole shit is about this. So it's going to be The Substance. But pretty cool that it's actually more competitive than normal. Best Film Editing. Of course, if you're an awards watcher, you know that this is a very key down the line category, a key pickup. The history of Best Picture winners that haven't won Best Film Editing is not long for sure. You don't need to win Best Film Editing to win Best Picture, but it greatly increases your chances if you do. The nominees this time are Wicked, Emilia Perez, The Brutalist, Anora, and Conclave. I think it's down to that top three, Conclave, Anora, and The Brutalist. Really though, I think it's kind of crystallizing between seemingly our two Best Picture contenders, Conclave and Anora. Brutalist seemingly less strong in terms of wins than we might have expected when it won at the Globes. Sean Baker, director of Anora, does all his own editing as well. He is his own editor. Could that narrative propel him to win in this category? Conclave, very tightly made movie across the board, including its editing. Hard to say. I think Conclave is probably the slight favorite in this, but I'm going to go with Anora. That's going to be my pick, but I think it's hard to call. Best Costume Design, the nominees are Complete Unknown, Gladiator 2, Conclave, Nosferatu, and Wicked. Again, if Conclave runs it up, I certainly could see it, although how many different costumes does that movie really have? It's priest and nun robes for the most part, right? Leaving that aside, you can do that in most movies, to be honest, to be fair. Nosferatu would be awesome in this, right? But this is probably going to be Wicked. We're talking about Wicked a lot in these categories, and I think this Wicked has broad support. That's why it got all these nominations. That's why it's probably like in 5th place for Best Picture, which is significant. So I think Wicked's the call. Best Cinematography, the nominees are Netflix's Maria, Emilia Perez, Dune Part 2, Nosferatu, and The Brutalist. Emilia Perez being in here is perplexing. Again, speaks to the initial very strong support that movie had before that movie's campaign completely exploded. Dune Part 2, goes without saying, is gorgeous. Nosferatu cinematography is probably the one thing you would point to as the most successful element of that movie, right? It would be a pretty cool recognition of Robert Eggers' vision to see that movie win there. But I think The Brutalist will get this. I mean, that movie cinematography is a knockout. That's one of the most overwhelming in a good way things about that movie is like visually, like what it commands. And I think that's a super just nomination. That's what I'll go with. Moving on to the screenplay categories. Again, these are significant for predicting future success up the line, much like editing. The nominees are Best Original Screenplay are September 5, The Brutalist, The Substance, A Real Pain, and Anora. Given Anora's surging strength, I think it's a pretty clear pick here. Could The Substance win? I think so. Could The Brutalist win? Especially if it has a good day. Yes. A Real Pain, I don't see it given that movie's overall lack of support. No Best Picture nominee for it. September 5, obviously not recognized really anywhere else. So hard to pick it here. I think it's probably Brutalist versus Anora, but I'm going to go with Anora given the movie's surging. Best Adapted Screenplay, the nominees are Emilia Perez, Sing Sing, Nickel Boys, Complete Unknown, and Conclave. Love that Nickel Boys got in here. Love that Sing Sing got in here as well, especially because Sing Sing didn't get the Best Picture. Nickel Boys did. I would love one of those movies to win this, just as like extra recognition, but it would not be wise to pick it. I think it's pretty clearly going to Conclave, which has been winning Adapted Screenplay basically all race. And that movie is, I think, really tight. That movie, I think, just is very successful at what it's doing. I wouldn't point to a Complete Unknown script as one of its best strengths, to be honest. It's a movie that's pretty conventional, and that's why people like it. I think this is one of the least competitive categories of the night. Conclave's going to win Best Adapted Screenplay. It seems pretty clear. Moving on to acting. We're almost done. Best Supporting Actor. Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice, Yuri Borisov for Anora, Edward Norton for Complete Unknown, Guy Pearce for The Brutalist, and Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. Well, this one, like often happens with some supporting races every year, Divine Joy Randolph literally never lost for The Holdovers, right? And then she won the Oscar. Shocking, right? Kieran Culkin has never lost this category all season. So there's really no intrigue at all. The only thing you could say against it, I guess, is that A Real Pain is not the most recognized movie overall, That being said, Guy Pearce, he didn't get nominated for SAG, which was a big miss. Yuri Borisov never won anything for Anora, so it's really hard to pick one of those two. I think, if anything, Edward Norton has a kind of career achievement win of A Complete Unknown had a really big night. It's probably the most plausible of the bunch, but there's really nothing plausible about it. It's going to be Kieran Culkin. In doing so, it would be a bit more atypical than usual because The Real Pain was not nominated for Best Picture. Culkin will end up being the first Best Supporting Actor win without a Best Picture nomination for the movie since Christopher Plummer won for Beginners in 2012. So it is pretty significant and uncommon for this type of win to happen. Moving on to Best Supporting Actress, again, we don't have a whole lot of intrigue with this because only one person won. Nominees: Monica Barbaro for Complete Unknown, Ariana Grande for Wicked, Felicity Jones for The Brutalist, Isabel Rossellini for Conclave, and Zoe Saldana for Emilia Perez. Zoe has won this across the board and continued to, win this after the Emilia Perez controversy blew up, winning at BAFTA, winning at SAG, of course also winning at the Globes and the Critics' Choice. Who would you pick to unseat Zoe if Emilia Perez won nothing? Monica Barbaro is only nominated at SAG, nowhere else, which I was super happy about. I love that she's here. It's an excellent nomination. Probably would be my pick, even though I love Zoe. Ariana Grande is the one who's been nominated across the board, just like Zoe, but she's never won. And I think maybe in the back of people's minds, oh, well, Ariana Grande, we can give her the Oscar for Wicked for Good, Wicked 2 next year. Honestly, I think it's pretty good, calculus. I get it. So there's just no reason to expect Zoe not to win at this point, and that's what's going to happen. Best Actress is certainly a lot more interesting and a lot more competitive, and that's what's great about it this year. Cynthia Erivo, nominated for Wicked, Fernanda Torres for I'm Still Here, Mikey Madison for Honora, Carla Sofia Gascon for Emilia Perez, and Demi Moore for The Substance. Of course, Carla Sofia Gascon is likely in last place at this point after everything that's happened. Also, she never ended up winning anything. So, there wasn't actually that much momentum in the end. The Globe was split between Fernanda Torres and Demi Moore. And Fernanda Torres, her win in the drama field of the Globes wasn't up against anyone else that got nominated for the Oscar. So Fernanda Torres has never actually gone head-to-head against Demi Moore in any of the precursor awards. So you don't actually know quite how strong the Fernanda Torres case is. And we do know that the case has some strength because I'm Still Here was a surprise Best Picture nomination. We were expecting it in Best International Feature Film, which it got. It was talked about that Fernanda Torres or Best Actress could happen, but then Best Picture happened. That was not really talked about too much. So it's important to note that that hasn't quite happened. You can't completely rule out Fernanda Torres. But it seems the battle is truly between Mikey Madison for Honora and Demi Moore for The Substance. Demi Moore winning for the Globe, winning at the Critics' Choice, and then just recently again winning at the SAG. Mikey Madison, though, winning at the BAFTA. It seems like it's going to be Demi Moore. The narrative is there, even though Mikey Madison does have the ingenue narrative as well, and is pretty clearly in the stronger movie, the movie that's contending for Best Picture. I'll go with Moore, but I don't think it's necessarily locked, although she's pretty clear favorite at this point. One thing going against Fernanda Torres, too, is that nobody has ever won Best Actress without a SAG or BAFTA nomination. Of course, the days of, yesteryear don't necessarily predict future performance with the awards. Of course, we know how the preferential ballot works, which is relatively new, 15 years at this point. And the Academy is more international than ever before, which has affected nominations, as we've seen for a few years now. So it's possible, but it just hasn't happened before. And of course, that reminds me that I forgot to talk about Best International Feature Film. I think it's just Best International Film now, of course, formerly foreign language film. The nominees are The Girl with the Needle from Denmark, Flow from Latvia, The Sea of the Sacred Fig from Germany by way of Iran. Check out my review for that explanation. Emilia Perez from France/Mexico, made in France, about Mexico. I think it technically counts for France. And then I'm Still Here from Brazil. When the nominations happened, we saw how many nominations Emilia Perez got, literally the most nominated movie here, right? Seemed like it was a lock to at least win this category, right? But then, I'm Still Here also got into Best Picture. It's rare to have two Best Picture nominees in this category. Usually it's only one, and that one movie will always win against the other movies that are in Best Picture, right? However, given everything that happened with Emilia Perez and the larger-than-expected strength of I'm Still Here is the pick. It's certainly my pick. That movie was in my top 20 for the year. Emilia Perez is my least favorite of the Best Picture nominees in general. It should be the win. and I'm happy it's actually going to play out this way. This is pretty good. Back to acting, though, with Best Actor, the nominees are Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice, Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing, Ralph Fiennes for Conclave, Timothy Chalamet for Complete Unknown, and Adrian Brody for The Brutalist. Ralph Fiennes, even if Conclave wins Best Picture, even if Conclave has an amazing night, hard to really pick him to win. It'd be a just career achievement type win for sure, but he just hasn't really won anything. Conversely, Brody has won everything to this point, except the SAG Award, which just went to Timothy Chalamet. And, I think for a while there was a lot of talk about could a Complete Unknown via the preferential ballot, via being the least disliked of all the nominees, that type of mindset, could Complete Unknown be the Best Picture winner? And we just didn't get quite enough wins in the precursors to necessarily pick that, even though that thought process began because Complete Unknown was a stronger performer with the nominations than we expected. James Mangold getting into Best Director, kind of surprisingly. Monica Barbaro getting into Best Supporting Actress after not being nominated basically anywhere else, right? And just, would have 7-8 nominations overall. That being said, Timmy wasn't winning anything. It was always going to Brody. And then Timmy wins at SAG, which is the largest voting body of the Academy, although it's a smaller percentage than it used to be. This is hard because it's what do you think's going to happen? What do you want to happen? Are they the same thing? In this case, Brody, if he wins, he would be only the 11th actor to have 2 Best Actor wins. Of course, Daniel Day-Lewis only went with 3. Brody winning for The Pianist, about 20 years ago, right? He was the youngest Best Actor winner at age 29. If Timmy wins for Complete Unknown, of course, his portrayal as Bob Dylan, he would now set the record as the new youngest Best Actor winner, a younger 29, taking the award away from his competition, Adrian Brody. Crazy narrative. And it's hard because putting them against each other, I think the best performance of the two is Adrian Brody as Laszlo Toth in The Brutalist, which is an original performance, right? I mean, he's absolutely spectacular. He commands the screen. It's an incredible tour de force performance. Timmy, despite being in a more conventional movie, is really standout, really tremendous as Bob Dylan. And we do know how successful actors can be at winning for portraying real life people, right? Winston Churchill, Darkest Hour, Gary Oldman wasn't that long ago, right? It's hard. Also, you have the narrative about Chalamet, right? He is the generation. He is the new Leonardo DiCaprio. He is the next great American actor. And there is something to be said about actually winning kind of earlier in your career versus waiting until you're 7th nomination to win for The Revenant like Leo did, or winning for Son of a Woman like Al Pacino did, right? And it just feels bad to take all that mental gymnastics, which I think is quite just ultimately, and stack it up against Brody, who's fucking amazing. So I really have no qualms with either one winning because I like both. I don't. It doesn't feel right to say does Brody deserve to be a 2-time winner? There's only a 2-time winner. There's only 11 of those. I don't think that's right because you judge the performance against its competition. I think it's still going to be Brody, but would not be shocked if it's Timmy because I think A Complete Unknown has a lot of chances to just kind of be everyone's, top half of the ballot across the board, and The Brutalist is probably a more polarizing movie overall. Remains to be seen how hurt Brody was by the, Brutalist AI controversy, which ultimately to me is quite small potatoes. In general, this has been an amazing award season for smear campaigns and takedowns and whatnot between the unearthing of Carlos Sofia Gascon's old tweets and whatnot, The Brutalist using artificial intelligence in a previously undisclosed manner, Emilia Perez doing the same, Fernando Torres previously wearing blackface in a comedy sketch years ago, right? We've had a lot of these kind of old school classic reveals in the season, right? Maybe to some voters, Brody having his performance slightly augmented, namely his pronunciation of certain words in Hungarian was modified, given he's not a native speaker, right? We don't know to what scale it was, though. Perhaps that dings him in some eyes, and people go with Chalamet. I don't think it's going to be that big of a detriment to the movie, and I don't think that's the reason The Brutalist seemingly has fallen to third place behind Conclave and Anora in Best Picture. But it probably has at least some impact, right? I'm still going to go with Adrian Brody for Best Actor, but man, it's a really hard one to call. I feel like this is one that if you're wrong on the pick, you're like, oh, of course it was the other one, right? It's really hard to say. That leads us to Best Director. Nominees are Jacques Audiard for Emily in Paris, James Mangold for Complete Unknown, Coralie Fargett for The Substance, Brady Corbet for The Brutalist, and Sean Baker for Anora. Pretty clearly between Baker and Corbet. They've split these awards, but Baker has won more of them overall. Feels like that's where it's going. Although either one is a great pick, either one is super well earned. They both can competing in different ways. You know, Baker is a very much a advocate for the industry, for changing the way the industry operates in terms of the finances of small films and independent films and things like that, and the changing landscape and advocating for the theater experience and things like that. And similarly but differently, Corbet is very much an advocate for like protecting creative freedom and advocating for the artist not being interfered with, right? It's literally in the text of The Brutalist. They've both been talking about that, you know, on the trail. And I think they're both genuine in how they go about it. It's not new, these approaches. New for them either. It's real. I feel like this is going to be an Oscars where there's a lot of things recognized, right? We've kind of already gone through that to this point with the picks. So I feel like I lean Brady Corbet, even though it feels like he has way less momentum than Sean Baker. But I mean, how can I say that though? I mean, Sean Baker won the Directors Guild Award. The Directors Guild almost always is in lockstep with the Best Director win. So I feel like you got to go with Baker. But Corbet's kind of lurking there. I don't know. That leads us to Best Picture. After all this, you can probably tell who are the real contenders. But overall, the nominees are Nickel Boys, Dune Part 2, I'm Still Here, The Substance, Amelia Perez, Complete Unknown, Wicked, Conclave, The Brutalist, and Anora. Feels like it's between Anora and Conclave, with The Brutalist in third, and A Complete Unknown and Wicked lurking. Everything else I don't think has any chance at all. Can probably knock off Wicked. From there, Conclave did well at the BAFTAs, but it feels like a lot of British bias, right? The Brutalist ended up not doing nearly as much as expected post-Globes. And the Globes ended up being a kind of false flag. We seem to forget that they're not actually an industry event and not super predictive. And then you remind yourself that Anora actually was the favorite ever since Cannes, throughout all of the lead up to the season, the early season, and then isn't the favorite after the Globes and the nominations, and then turns out it becomes the favorite again. So really it was the favorite all along, right? And I think that's why it's going to win. But you'll see a lot of people picking Conclave, and it would be foolish not to acknowledge its case because Conclave had a great SAG Awards, and Nora did not, right? Mikey Madison didn't win. The SAG Ensemble Award went to Conclave. It didn't go to Anora. So Conclave is not just BAFTA-pilled. It's propelled by more than that. That being said, Conclave doesn't have a Best Director nomination. Edward Berger didn't make it into Best Director, which was a bit of a surprise. So to win with a BAFTA and SAG win, but not Best Director, you'd have to look back to Argo in 2012 for the only time that's actually happened. That's a lot to go against, right? Furthermore, the Producers Guild Award went to Anora, which says a lot because the PGA also uses a preferential ballot, a lot like the Oscars. You know, I think a big talking point has been, oh, well, Anora, that's a movie that's very explicitly about sex, right? Very graphic. Seemingly forgetting that Poor Things won 4 Oscars last year, which is even more of a graphic and sexual movie than Anora is, by the fact that this is a movie about a sex worker. 7 of the last 10 PGA winners won Best Picture. The ones that didn't were La La Land, and which is obviously one of the biggest upsets ever. 1917, also one of the biggest upsets, and then also The Big Short, which was the spotlight year, I believe. So, no Best Director for Conclave, no PGA win for Conclave. Brutalist never really got there in the end. BAFTA British bias. I gotta pick Anora, and I like Anora more. I think Anora was my number 4 movie of the year. Brutalist was 1, followed by Challengers and Dune. So it's a great pick. I love it. It's funny, the last few years, my number 1 movie has won Best Picture. It's kind of been a great place to be. It's usually not like that, right? But Oppenheimer, Everything Everywhere All at Once, a few years before that, Parasite, been pretty good for me at the Oscars. So if only my second favorite of the nominees wins, I'll take it. It's pretty good. And it's a pretty awesome nom, because I think this is a movie that's pretty crowd pleasing. Did decent business, but it's not a big movie by any means. And even if Mikey Madison seemingly isn't going to win Best Actress, I mean, she's clearly certified as a, brand new star. Very excited to see the rest of her career. She's quite young still. So, yeah, I think it's Anora. But, Brutalist lurking, Complete Unknown with its broad support lurking. Conclave, can it do it? Can it be the ultimate upset? Probably not. To recap, here are my 2025 Oscar predictions. Make sure you watch the full video for my explanations. Best International Feature Film, I'm Still Here. Best Documentary Feature, No Other Land. Best Animated Feature, The Wild Robot. Best Visual Effects, Dune Part 2. Best Sound, Wicked. Best Song, El Mal from Emilia Paris. Best Score, The Brutalist. Best Production Design, The Brutalist. Best Makeup and Hairstyling, The Substance. Best Film Editing, Anora. Best Costume Design, Wicked. Best Cinematography, The Brutalist. Best Original Screenplay, Anora. Best Adapted Screenplay, Conclave. Best Supporting Actress, Zoe Saldana and Emilia Perez. Best Supporting Actor, Kieran Culkin in A Real Pain. Best Actor, Adrian Brody in The Brutalist. Best Actress, Demi Moore in The Substance. Best Director, Sean Baker for Anora. And Best Picture, Anora. Let me know what your picks are, who do you want to win, etc. And, of course, make sure you come back when the Oscars happen. I'll be doing my reaction about who did win, what I inevitably got wrong, what the surprises of the night were, what all that means. And in general, stick around if you love movies. I watch 100 new movies a year, review almost all of them on the channel. Love to talk about movies, love to talk about the award season as well, box office, all that stuff. And yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll see you next week. All right, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, we have a shorter one. As of right now, we'll see what else comes up. Of course, we're going to talk about the 2025 Oscars and react to those results, the surprises, the takeaways, etc. Lisa of Blackpink, debut solo album, Alter Ego, coming out. Very exciting. Also, the premiere/return of Daredevil in the MCU, Daredevil Born Again premiere on Disney+. We'll see what else comes out. Make sure you subscribe. YouTube.com/nostalgiapod. Linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See the links below. Get the best of 2025 Spotify playlist link below. Let me know it's good, and I'll see you next week.